how do you teach? So like I teach, I teach space privilege and resource, right? Like an
Okay.
owner should be able to control space privileges and resources. And I make a, comparison to children as like a teenager. You can't make them physically to do shit. So what you can do is you can exercise control over space, privilege, and resource, right? So that's my go-to, right, explanation of that concept. And when I'm trying to teach people, like, why not on the couch? Why not pulling? Why not this? Why not that? Well, sometimes I have to just teach them, that. What is your angle? Because I think this might be helpful for young dog trainers who may not know how to put it to words or how to put it into, a 3-step system or a 4-step, whatever system. How do you teach that?
For just space in general and
For
understanding.
space, or just like
Or
basic
just too much freedom.
relationship components that owners should take care of. That's not obedience. Stuff that isn't obedience that should be handled.
There's a lot that kind of goes into it, and there's a lot of different ways that you can cover it based on the situation at hand. What I can go ahead and say from the beginning is, if you are struggling outside, which for a lot of dog owners, they're like, oh, like everything is fine in the house. Like
Except for outside.
Totally okay. You don't understand, when we get outside or when we get to the dog park or when we're blah, 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 this is where we're seeing the issues. The dog won't listen to me.
Right.
Well, let me ask you a question. Inside the house where you're not struggling, what direction does the dog ever have to follow? And I don't mean direction by way of like militant,
commands,
like leader or anything like that, but at any point, are you giving your dog direction that goes against what they impulsively want?
Yeah. Are they accountable to anything?
Yeah, and that could be for simple stuff. If you have a dog that's clingy, that follows you, you go to the bathroom, follows you into the bathroom. You go to the couch, it's on the couch. You go to the bed, it goes to the bed with you. The second you go to the kitchen, you grab like a bag that's crinkly and your dog runs over and it jumps on you and you tell it to sit and you feed it.
Right.
Instead of that, try interrupting the impulsive movement. That would allow a dog to get closer in proximity to the resource or the situation it wants. Not because that behavior is necessarily bad,
right?
But because that's going to allow you to see two very important things. If you are creating a boundary or a rule that says, hey, don't follow me in the kitchen, don't follow me in the bathroom right now. Right now, I don't want you on the bed and the couch. It's not that I mind it. I just want to create a rule that says no more. If I find that—
Can you stop a behavior or reduce a behavior is what you were talking about. Yeah.
If every time I go to the kitchen, I come back, you're still there. If every time I try to sit on the couch, you're still trying to get up. And I'm actively trying to create a rule that says we're not doing this anymore, and my dog's not listening, it's hinting at one of two things. Either my communication is not as clear as I think it is because the dog has no idea what I'm asking of it.
Right.
Or he or she knows exactly what I'm asking, but is not prioritizing my information.
Right.
And if that's the case, why? Most of the time, that's predicated on how we live with the dog. If the dog gets to do what it wants when it wants inside the house, why the hell would it listen to us outside?
Exactly.
Well, and there's a couple things there that, as you guys are kind of talking about this, it makes me want to like unpack a couple things for listeners. So number one, that for the longest time was mine and Brent's most popular episode on the podcast, which was tips for structure. Because I think in the dog training world, one thing that I think is very difficult, which is why I'm so happy to have someone on who like can explain things. Because one thing that's so difficult in the dog training world is a lot of people like say stuff vaguely. Your dog needs structure, your dog needs obedience, your dog needs this. And someone who's not a dog trainer is like, okay, but how?
But why?
And I noticed, and I noticed in particular, even a lot of dog trainers have a hard time explaining. Like if you like tell me what is structure, they're like, well, it's, and they have a hard time figuring out how to put it to words. They know what it is, just like you were talking about, but they can't explain it to someone else. And so,
they may not have broken it down to be like, oh, I see the 10 component pieces that not letting your dog in the kitchen provides, or whatever it is.
Well, and the why, like Blake was just talking about, it's, if I were to set a boundary, a very clear boundary, when I go to the kitchen, there is a no zone for my dogs in the kitchen. From when the wood turns into the tile on the floor, my dog does not cross that zone, or like the cabinet line or whatever the case. And then clients are like, why does that work? Why does that help? For exactly what you just said. Well, if a dog is spending all day just catering to their own impulses and never ever having to hold themselves accountable for what you said, why would they listen to you? They just exist in a world where anything they want, they do.
Yeah, that's another thing though too, from a distraction standpoint. They go, well, yeah, but I just want my dog to just like come when called and like it always chases squirrels.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever, like I said before, have you ever tried giving direction inside your house that allows you to fail safely?
Right.
That I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah,
That is something I wanted you to talk to you
that's
about.
so important to understand that like a client is not a professional dog trainer. And even as professional dog trainers, we make mistakes and we will continue to make mistakes.
Right.
You need a safe environment where you can fuck up.
Yep.
And if you do make those mistakes, you go, good to know I'm not quite there yet. But for example, if you have a dog that like goes bananas USA when you come home, create a rule that says, hey, we're not going to do that right now. Or maybe now we can do it and now we can't. But if you can't even stop your dog from jumping up on you excitedly, why would you be able to stop it from when a guest comes over? Or why would a dog listen to you here or here? If you can't get these things inside the house first, you're not going to get them outside.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense.
Because it's a controlled environment. It's a laboratory. Like you can't get results there.
Well, and it also falls into the relationship because it's practice, but the more that you practice helping your dog control their impulses by way of giving them clear communication that this is not acceptable right now, not only do they practice the actual skill set of not jumping on someone, even though they're excited and they learn how to calm them down actively. That's a skill the dog can learn in and of themselves.
Yeah.
But so is the communication tool of like, oh, I would, but Dad said no. And that comes with the relationship aspect because like we mentioned before, dogs are smart, kind of like a kid. They can know what you want and choose not to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Real quick. So going back to the failing safely. So like 6-7 months ago, I was watching your content and I saw the failing safely video where you were explaining to some client failing safely. And obviously as dog trainers, like I don't like saying the same script over and over. Like you do it for a couple of weeks and I get bored. Then I go, how else can I explain this? And that's just how I like to do it. So, you know, someone who did a lesson with me 6 months ago is not getting the same lesson 2 months later, you know? And that's just because I like to figure shit out. Right. But when I came across that video and I was like, failing safely, that sounds dope. I stole that for like a whole 3 weeks. And I don't use it anymore, but it was such a great, you know, it defines itself, you know, it's one of those terms that defines itself. And so for the people who aren't listening, can you describe what failing safely is?
Yeah, absolutely.
For people who are listening, sorry, did I say aren't?
So if we're looking at the idea of failing safely is you're going to try to do something different than what you normally do. Dog normally does this, dog normally does that. I'm going to give you direction that goes against your impulsive instinct. And it's either going to work great or when dad comes home or mom comes home and I say, nope, I want you staying there. I don't want you jumping up, or I'd rather you do this, not that. And the dog ends up not listening and jumping up to give my wife or my husband hugs and kisses, whatever it is. I failed, but it's safe because
it's low liability.
You got attacked with hugs and kisses.
Right.
You see what I mean? Or if like, oh, well, you don't understand, my dog is not good with my husband or my wife, whatever, then that's fine. Then try to do something with you. You try to create a rule that says, hey, when I sit down and watch Game of Thrones, this area where the area rug is and the coffee table.
You have to be on the wood.
Yeah, you know? I just don't want you here. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's wrong. It's not that you're never allowed here. Right now, this is off limits. But you can't get that. You failed, but you failed safely because it's not that big of a deal. You need to try and see where you stand, because when you look at things outside, what are we going to do outside? We're going to try to correct something. And that's, I also have a different way that I like to explain a correction, because a lot of people will pop or try to interrupt or these things or try to redirect. For me, a correction is not just a punishment. A correction is you're correcting something. You're fixing something that is wrong.
Right.
So if you're looking to fix something that is wrong, most of the time your direction is very simple. Not that.
Right. Instead, do this. Right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
You know,
Michael Ellis calls it a block. You're blocking behaviors.
And you know what too? I think that's even that right there. Like, as I think of other trainers that we like just follow and stuff, just to kind of see what's out there. I don't see enough of a delineation there. I think the easiest way that I personally have been describing it is, if you're going to correct in order to block a behavior or pull a dog out of whatever it is that they're focusing on, once the correction is done, a correction is just the block. Once that's done and you have the dog's attention,
Give the directive.
It's still, right.
Yeah.
It's still your job to do something with this attention. You know, otherwise dogs are just like bark, bark. Sorry, what? Oh, anyway, bark, bark. And it's just, you know, and they just go right back to it, you know? So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. And I wanted to ask you something. So since we're talking about failing safely, I also wanted to bring up from the perspective of the newer dog trainer and of the dog owner. A lot of times, I'm sure in jiu-jitsu too, like, you know, you fail safely in practice because in tournament time, it's like, it matters, you know. I noticed that a lot of newer trainers and a lot of owners, they don't like to fail safely because they just don't like to fail. So not only by showing them safe ways to do it, can they do it repeatedly without issue, but just by you saying it, hey, look, this is how you're going to fail safely. You're going to let them know like, oh, okay, I guess he's expecting me to fail. I guess it's not that big a deal, you know, because people have that weird pressure that they put on themselves and their dogs of like, yeah, well, you know, I've never, you know, it's been quarantine. I've never had a guest here before, but when they get here, I'm pretty confident he's going to be perfect for like some reason, you know, but people don't like to not be good at something, you know? So I like the fact that just the concept, just the wording of failing safely makes it okay for people to fail.
I set people up. I let them know like you're not going to be perfect, and I don't expect you to walk out of a training session or a board and train program a professional dog trainer. It's not going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. So let's make sure when you're making these mistakes, you're making them wisely, you're making them smart. And at the very least, if you are in more of a real world situation and you're expecting or hoping that the dog is going to perform a certain way, you are prepared to ensure and get the behavior in the event that the dog doesn't do it on its own.
Right.
Because the alternative is you just ask dogs to do things when they're doing something fucked up.
And going back to that correction, not that this, both are equally important.
Right.
Because if I'm saying not that, and then I'm leaving it open-ended, why not give the dog, hey, this is something that we can do, so that the next time around, if I try to offer that advice and the dog does it, whether I'm making adjustments to do it sooner, give it advice, help the dog find the right path.
Right.
They get to avoid the
correction.
Dog, I can just do this without that. Well, why didn't you tell me that? That by itself is important. But alternatively, if I just try to teach the dog the alternative behavior without addressing the mistake, because remember I said, not that, this. If I don't address not that, that's a major problem. And that's online today, the idea of like reward the good, ignore the bad, and just redirect the behavior by way of like, we're not going to have the conversation of what you did was wrong. That's a big issue. That would be like my daughter. She's 2 years old. She's going through stuff. She's great. And then she's making mistakes. And that's
terrible twos, man.
Yeah. Right. I'm shooting for terrific twos.
Terrific twos. Yes. I mean, you are a dog trainer, of course.
She's drawing on our refrigerator. Right? And as she's drawing in a Sharpie,
oh no!
I go. Well, here's some ice cream. Boom, and I redirect her. Now she's not drawing on the fridge.
And you're just like, yoink, give me that.
and she gets it. That's great. Now I have her doing something better. But nowhere in that conversation did we talk about you can't. I don't want to see you doing this again. Both are equally important, and that's dog training. The more communication that you can give and not limit a dog to, the better it's going to be.
Correct. And I wanted to add something to that. This was another thing. I was doing a group class today, and another thing that I thought of today that I've thought of before, but I've never like said it to a class before, was an interesting thing is like, what is, you know, and I made this joke to them. I was like, I promise you guys, this makes sense. Just stick with me. What does it mean to improve one's cardio? If you're running, if you're swimming, if you're biking, your lungs don't like get bigger. Why can you run faster for longer? Part of it is like physiologically, you make new connections. Like you get from A to B quicker because you've got like bigger and stronger veins that push oxygen better. But the other aspect, and this really holds true for swimming, building cardio for swimming, your body doesn't hold more. Your lungs don't get bigger. Your body gets more efficient with the amount of oxygen that it always had. So you can swim harder for longer with less breath, with the same amount of oxygen as ever. And so when you talk about, and this is what I was telling them, because we were working with a couple of Neapolitan Mastiff puppies who they're Neos, they're very barky, you know. And so any little person, any little thing that they see, yap, 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 you know. And so we were talking about redirecting, we were talking about corrections down the line, we were talking about all this stuff and like when and how it's all appropriate. And part of the process was, like you were talking about, if we want to build efficiency with the same effort, you address it the one time with the proper correction to block it and then redirect it. That way, next time, if you, like you said, whatever the adjustment is, sooner or farther away or something, you know, the dog makes that adjustment minus the correction. That's efficiency.
Yeah.
And then from there, so now the way that I explained it to them was like, so now we've taken this situation from potentially like a negative to at least neutral. The dog doesn't have to love whoever that is, but they're just not worried about it. Just do what I'm saying and you're good. Now we have the possibility to make it a positive. What if the dog makes that correction by themselves? And then I can go and actively create a situation to reward. It's as easy as, hey, sit. And they're going to sit because they're focused. And then boom, here's your treat. Good man, you sat, you know, there you go. So that was some, and honestly, I'm excited to hear, or rather I'm happy / not surprised to hear that you and Tyler are friends, because my favorite thing about Tyler Muto before we had him on, the moment that really stuck out to me, and I've talked about this with like 5 other guests, so forgive me, everybody, is I was watching him do
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So I was watching him. Damn, you guys are. I was watching him do a video where there was like the camera person over here, a little elevated like platform dog bed here, and he was working e-collar place commands with this dog that wasn't new to training and wasn't new to place, but was new to place with remote collar. So he's working it. He does a few reps, you know, place good off, place good off. And this is something that really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
He puts the dog in place, leaves the dog there. He walks away to the camera to like explain something like this. And the dog does one of these, and they slowly take their paw off the bed, like unsure, and kind of put it on the floor. Yep. He realizes this is happening. He doesn't say no. He doesn't correct with the collar. All he does, while still talking to the camera, takes like 2 steps back toward the dog, and the dog goes, no correction, no nothing, releases him, resets, and the dog does not make the same mistake again for the rest of the lesson. And he explained after the fact, so you guys may have noticed I did not correct this dog. That was on purpose, because sometimes you got to let little things like this go for the sake of not only the momentum of this particular lesson, but for the momentum of the entirety of the exercise. I want dogs to not be afraid to try things, not be afraid to make mistakes. I want them to be in a calm enough frame of mind that their cup isn't full with like fear and anxiety, so that if I take a step in, they take the hint and they go, okay. You know, and so keeping it even keeled like that, I think falls into efficiency as well, because a newer trainer, like when I was a younger trainer, I would have corrected the dog for that because I didn't know any better. Yeah. And it would have stressed the dog out, and the dog would have likely have had a more rough lesson than Tyler's dog did.